Hi, this is Janet Fitch, and it is noon on Wednesday, so it is Writing Wednesday, where I answer your writing questions, craft questions, questions about man, God, and the universe, everything that has to do with you as a writer is part of the deal. And it is early summer, it's beautiful out, and things seem to be coming back to life, so that's always a good thing. And I have a number of questions today from the internet, but as usual, if you have questions, just put them all in the comments and I will absolutely get to them. And if you want me to design, hi Wendy, good to see you. And if you want me to design a Writing Wednesday around your question, write to me through my website, janetfitchwrites.com, and I can do a whole Writing Wednesday on your question. Hi, Jeffrey. Well, the first thing I wanted to address was I have a friend who might be joining us, who is beginning to write short stories and wanted some guidance on what the best way to do that is. And my feeling generally is, now that she's ready to, she's been writing other things, and now she's ready to do short stories, is to take a class or go into a workshop of some sort. And there's all kinds of workshops. There are drop-in workshops. I know Judy Reeves in San Diego does that. This friend lives in Canada, so maybe it's not as prevalent there. But I'm sure there are workshops, just like drop-in workshops. There can be extension classes that you can take. There's, if you have financial difficulties, there are usually meetups. You can use meetups and exchange work with other people. Learning to write the short story, you need readers, and writers make the best readers because they also need readers. So it's very much everybody kind of picking the bugs off everybody else. And we are monkeys, so that's kind of natural to us. But yeah, you're looking for a workshop, you're looking for a class. If you can find a class that you can swing financially, that is that's right. Malika says, how do you spell Judy Reeves? Just like that, Judy Reeves. And she wrote the book, The Writer's Book of Days, and Writing Together, Writing Alone, Writing Together, about writers groups. And she's quite a resource, so even her book is a resource. Look her up online, Judy Reeves. I think it's San Diego Writers Ink, like the Writers Ink, the ink in your pen. She's really good. But she doesn't teach classes. She teaches like drop-in stuff. So look at your local offerings of workshops and classes. But since the pandemic, the prevalence of, the now online workshops and classes people have learned how to do that. So you don't, even if you're living in a rural area, without a community college in, 200 miles, you can still have a class. And there's nothing like a teacher-led class when you're learning. But, a meetup is, will get you in the right direction, because probably somebody's been in a class and can share information and is a little bit ahead of where you're at. Summer writing conferences are all over the place right now. I mean, starting this summer, but it's late to apply. You'd probably be better with an online class or drop-in class or something in your area. But I do recommend that. So we have a bunch of questions today. So the first question I'm going to answer is from Steve DeGroot. I know he's on. Hi, Steve. So I'll answer your question first. Hi, Ruthie. Steve is working on a Civil War novel, So he says, there are 4 different languages spoken in my novel: Cajun French, Cuban Spanish, Bahamian, Bahamas, and Civil War era Afro-American slang. I've used bits of phrases for flavor with the help of online translation apps. Now, they're kind of interesting. Still, I want to make sure the dialogue of each language is the correct usage. Well, I don't think you're going to be able to, learn those languages. Obviously, that's not why you're asking. He says, any suggestions for who or what resources to contact regarding this? Super good question. Steve has got 4 different, language and dialect groups that he's going to be using. So he's just multiplied his problem by 4. Oh, well, that's writing. You have to go where the story goes. And he wants to use a little bit of the flavor of these, in terms of American slang. Let's talk about that one first, because it's not a foreign language. I would be careful of distorting the spelling, that old-fashioned thing with all the apostrophes and stuff. I'd avoid that if you can. But you're looking for slave narratives. People wrote at that time. People who are writing now about that era probably have some interesting little phrases that they've dug up in their research. So use them. Use any kind of historical, like well-researched historical documentaries. Ken Burns has like a lot of research facilities. He has the money to pay researchers to do a lot of this legwork. So you could piggyback on some of that, to look through what's available in film, in documentary. Look at plays that are written and set at that time. You want Black Americans. But don't overdo it. That's a light touch is really helpful there. But yeah, that's what I would do, is start looking at things maybe written by Black people close to that time. Look at people who, historians and documentarians, letters, that kind of thing. I would start at the library or JSTOR, JSTOR, which is all the academic journals. That you can use JSTOR as a private citizen. You can look up 200 articles a year on JSTOR now for free. It used to be you had to pony up, a couple $100, or go through an academic institution. But now you can do it as an individual. So definitely see what you can find in terms of letters, diaries, that kind of thing, Civil War, or just go by Black American, regional, and see what you can find through JSTOR. I mean, I leaned on it heavily when I was writing these Russian books. And books that you can take out of the library about, that era, written by, hopefully, Black Americans. Then you have Cuban Spanish and Cajun French, which are both current languages being used. I would just go on Facebook or go through social media and just say, does anybody know somebody who is Cuban? Does anybody know somebody who, is Cajun? Does anybody, and in Bahamas, you might even go there. Bahamian might be a little harder. I'd think about travel agent, they might have like a, Chamber of Commerce kind of thing for Bahamas, and just say, hey, I have a couple of questions about Bahama usage, or how would a Bahamian say blah, blah, blah. And you might find the person who says, sure, some bored person working for the government, they're like, yeah, I'll tell you. I remember trying to get information. I talked to somebody who is in Berlin and asked me about why I set the end of White Oleander in Berlin, and how I got all my research done, seeing I've never been to Berlin because I couldn't afford it. And I tried to think about art students. So I have art students in my book, and so try to find out where the art students would live. So I emailed the art schools, 2 art schools, or one was the school and one was like a feminist center at one of the art schools. And the person who I contacted, the feminist, like feminist student union or something at one of the art schools, was super helpful. So just because people say don't do it, they say no. It's like, don't pay too much attention to the no's, because in journalism, no's don't matter. It's only the yeses that matter. So it's like next. And then you just, you can email around for that Bahama connection. But you should be able to find Cubans in America that will talk to you. Somebody will know somebody who's Cuban. And somebody will know somebody who's Cajun and be able to hook you up. So Zora Neale Hurston's Barracoon, she interviews the last African slave. It'll be really interesting to see how she handles the language as a white 21st century author. You also have to think what's most appropriate for you and your book. That you are looking for rhythms, and you're looking maybe for choice phrases, a way that they would construct a sentence, or, the way they'd say somebody was a jerk, or the way they would say somebody is a sweetheart. And look for those phrases rather than trying to recapitulate their speech, because that's going to get you deep, deep, swampy territory. A really interesting author when it comes to dialect and talking about colonial language, the written language of the colonial power, and the oral Creole, is a writer named Patrick Chamoiseau. He's from Martinique, I believe, or maybe it's not Haiti. But it's a Caribbean, French-speaking Caribbean. I think it's Martinique. And he writes about how he writes about language is really, really interesting. And I know you've read the Tiffany Yannick, The Land of Love and Drowning. She does a really good job with this as well. So, just light touch, and you'll have it. John's with us. So he's been writing about fight scenes at his blog site, BookFox. Nice to see you. So I thought I got a question on in the interwebs this time. Hello there. I've read some of your answers on questions regarding writing tips towards forming more coherent and entertaining stories. My question would be, what other tips would you recommend into making fight/battle scenes more interesting? Okay. Well, I have a feeling that this is perhaps somebody who is doing mysteries, thrillers, or fantasy, sci-fi, and having vivid action scenes is really important. But so let's see what kind of things. First of all, I think that using the senses, if you're having a world, say if you're in World War One, what are the smells of the battlefield? What are the sounds? What's far away? What's close up? What are the animals? And animals, if I'm in World War One, I'm not looking from the top of a hill. If I'm in a battle, I'm going to be like next to the animals. I'm going to be in the mud. I'm going to be smelling like all kinds of stuff. And you can imagine those smells. You can read memoir set in that war and, see what occurs to these people when they're, right next to the bomb, artillery fire or whatever. Senses. So start with the senses. Animals, it's not just, paws and neighing and stuff like that, but animals sweat. Their tack sweats, their tack creaks, the bits jangle. Really get sensitive to the presence of the senses. That's going to help a great deal. I had a student actually years ago who was writing his first book about World War One, and I was saying, what does it smell like? There's no smells, the Battle of Verdun, it doesn't smell like anything. He says, well, I have no sense of smell. It's like, oh. So that's like writing about a place you've never been. You use logic. What is present? What do they cook over? What's being blasted? What does white phosphorus smell like? What does mustard gas smell like? What does a horse smell like? Well, think about what a horse would smell. Even if you're a city person, a horse sweats and it poops and it has feed. What do they feed it? What is saddle leather? You've had a pair of shoes. What does saddle leather smell like? It creaks. Watch a Western. Get as close as you can. When I was writing my Russian Revolution novels, I listened to a lot of YouTube. What does a 1915 Evinrude outboard motor sound like? Well, guess what? On YouTube, you can listen. You can see somebody run a 1916 Evinrude outboard motor and describe what that sounds like, or different kinds of gunfire. There's a billion gun nuts on YouTube, and as a writer, I'm like, this is really helpful to know what different caliber, weapons sound like when they go off. How do you field dress a deer? Well, it's there. How do you shave with a straight razor? It's there. So when you do a battle scene, really try to be analytical about it. And okay, so there's that. Then there is the fact that war is different than a fight scene. A fight scene, if you've ever seen people fight in real life, there's the fight on the schoolyard. How does it start? How does it escalate? That's the dramatics of it. Controlling the pacing of how the fight escalates. The touchier people are, the faster it goes. Some people have to be goaded into anger, takes a while. But some people are already kind of touchy, and you can see their anxiety, you can see the level of their tension watching them before the fight breaks out. So what happens before the fight in a street fight or bar fight or, actual real life fight where people are going to duke it out? It's not Mike Tyson going 16 rounds. No, that's not how it works. A lot of it is about the setup. It's about the build up and how do we get to the point that somebody throws a punch. Some people just aren't that verbal, and they get to a certain level of frustration and they just hit you, um, so obviously the sense impressions are very important in the build, and detail is super important. You notice how people, what they do when they're getting upset. Um, you know what's happening around you. Are people backing up? Are they making like a circle? That's what they did in school. You know, everybody starts running towards the fight, and then they make a circle so they can watch it, you know. And who's going to try to break up the fight? So it gets small. Details get small. You're not going to notice a plane flying overhead at this point. You know, it gets very tight. People stop having internal thoughts pretty much when they get, you know, when they finally are duking it out. They see very small things. They see a vein in their forehead. They see, the whatever their lunch was on their face, the blood coming out of their nose. And then you notice, what do you notice, and what does the point of view character notice about their own body? Usually stinging, you know, you get sweat or blood in your eyes, you know, while you're fighting, and it's like, it's hard to see, and you could, the stinging, you know, somebody has a razor, which you didn't expect, you know, and it was like, you don't feel it, and suddenly you feel it. It's very chaotic, a fight scene. If it's told from the point of view of somebody watching, you know, like one of those people on the street, then what are they doing? You know, are they trying to, like, you know, are they upset to see this? I remember seeing two women fighting in the subway, grown women, like, you know, in their 30s, 40s, fighting a hot summer day in the subway. And one of the women was leaning on the pole, and the other woman didn't like it. And before you knew it, they were like grabbing each other's hair and punching each other. And I remember just feeling so sad for them, that they were so stressed in their lives that they would start punching each other in public, like, you know, a couple of elementary school kids. It was very sad. So think about how it fits into the story. Think how the emotion of the people who are, whoever your point of view character is, you know, are they watching it or are they participating? It happens very quickly. Nobody goes, you know, there's no 16 rounds in a street fight. You know, it ends really quickly. So it's all about the build and then the aftermath. And blows land. That's really important to me. I hate a scene where people almost hit each other. They almost get hurt. They almost have a big boo-boo. You know, it's like, no. If you're going to have a fight scene, do it. And do it like ugly. You know, public fighting is really ugly. And there's something really disgraceful about it. And I would not hesitate to include that. So don't make your character too stoic, you know, just used to getting hit. You know, yeah, I'm the tough guy, I'm used to getting hit. Well, it's more interesting if it hurts, you know. You get scared. That guy's going to break my arm, you know. Oh, he's going to bust my teeth and I don't have dental insurance. I can't afford this fight. Oh, you know. Think about what kind of things people in real life think about when they're in a fight. What do you see when somebody's like up close and really angry? You see their teeth. So that's some ideas. And then you want to tell the story, you know, so like, what's the point of the scene? You know, say you've created the most wonderful and realistic, you know, fight scene, exciting, but it's like, what are you showing us? Are you showing us that your tough person is tough? If we already know they're tough, do we need to see it? You know, it's more interesting to upset expectation, you know, and have the tough guy get beat up, and it's really hurts. It's really bad, and he was going to do something else that night, and instead he's lying on the pavement with a broken rib, and thinking about his life choices. So make sure that it has its proper place in the story. What else did I made a couple of notes. Then somebody said, and then girls, fight differently. I remember fighting the girls' basement, which was the bathroom when I was when I was a kid. And there were these two girls, and they were both like really chip on shoulder, waiting. They were not happy kids, and they were both looking for a fight. And they were both kind of tall, big girls. And one of them took the earring, hoop earring, remember those? Took the earring of the other girl and just like ripped it out of her ear. I mean, that's violence. So real violence is more interesting than what, these, oh yeah, they, punched him and he punched me. And it's like, that is not as interesting as somebody ripping the earring out of the other girl's ear. Or I remember seeing a movie called Remember My Name with, I don't remember who the guy was, but it was Geraldine Chaplin, and she was a ex-con. She'd just come out, and she was still on parole, and she was working as a bagger in this grocery store, and relentless sexual harassment from the manager. And she goes to her car afterwards. She had a hard day, and he's standing there with his arm up on her car so that she can't get to her car. And they have this chat, and he's just like, hey, baby, you need to, service me. And she takes the pencil that she's been using to mark stuff up, and she jams it into his armpit, like up into his armpit. And the violence of that, the shock, I mean, everybody could feel that. Read Joyce Carol Oates. She is extremely good at these small violences. There's one scene in, I want to say it's a book called The Assassins, where somebody gets their hand chopped off. And she does it really well. So don't hesitate to have a fight scene, to have violence. It puts the reader in the body of the book like nothing else, but it's got to be real. So it's got to hurt. And let's see, you want to tell a story. Things get sloppy, things get broken. It's not just people duking it out. You fall over the curb. You're fighting outside a bar, and you fall over the curb with your beer in your hand, and that breaks and cuts the shit out of you. Think about the possibilities. So anyway, that's that question. How are we doing here? Good. All right. So there's some other interesting questions that came up. What makes you write every day? Well, I assume that this didn't mean just me, but what makes one write every day is the kind of question behind the question. What makes me write every day is that it's a habit. It's time, so I do it. Why do I brush my teeth every day? Because it's time, and I do it without thinking about it. I also have invested a lot of my life into doing this work, so I have a lot invested. If I don't do it, nobody else is going to. I've arranged my day so that this is my, the major part of my day is that I write. The desire to play with the materials, it's really interesting to write. And if you remain curious about your story, also if you remain challenged by the requirement to write well, if you like puzzles, I mean, most writers kind of do. We're word people and we like a challenge or we wouldn't be doing it. Just the challenge of how beautiful a sentence can you create? How how interesting sensually can I make this? What does it need? What's wrong with it? What does it need? That puzzle will drive us onward. We want to solve the puzzle. We want to solve the mystery. We want to write beautifully. We want to make the angels weep, or just we want to feel the angels singing. I mostly they don't. Mostly it's craft. Mostly I've got my little workman's apron on. I got my tools in the pockets and I'm sitting there, hammering and tooling and doing all the things. And sometimes you get on a roll and this music starts coming out and it's just it's what I live for. I live for that. And it doesn't happen unless I'm already working hard. And then I get that lift, it's like, it must be the way surfing feels. You get, wow, now I'm in it. And that's addictive, that's what artists live for, is that feeling of liftoff. Painters have it, dancers have it, it's where you're right in the groove. If you're a musician, you know what that feels like. So that's one reason I write every day, just to spend time with my characters. I love them. They're maddening and interesting. And God, what happened? I remember years ago when I was married to a different guy, another life. I said, God, guess what so-and-so said today? And he said, they didn't say anything. They're just, figment of your imagination. But he was wrong, because they do say things and they do things, and it is very, very real. It's probably as real as my real life is. So it's living that second life. Let's see if there's anything else. Here's a question from Jeffrey. Oh, for next week. Okay, I'll hang on to that for next week. Here's another one. Do authors pay publishers have to pay publishers back for unsold books? No, they don't. But your sales data, that they keep and the industry is aware of, is known. How many returns they had. It figures into your next sale. If you had a publishing run of 40,000 and there were 20,000 returns, the sales price of your next book might not be as high as it would have been otherwise. So it comes back to you in a different way. True dat. So what else? I'll just answer Jeffrey's question. It's a good one. How do you know if I'm going too dark in a story already meant to be dark? Where's the line that separates a dark story from something that's unacceptable from society? It's a feeling. How much of this can a person take? Can a reader take? And for illustration, I'll say that The Memory Room by Mary Rakow, which was, it started off as a 3,000-page or 2,000-page dense novel about child abuse, horrific familial child abuse. And the writer had put a lot into it, really a lot of psychological currency had gone into this book. But who was going to read it? Nobody. And she had to find a different way to tell the story. It's the same story that, But what she did was, we went and saw a, oh God, what's the guy who does the broken plates? It's an S name, artist. And he's become a director, Schnabel, Julian Schnabel. And she saw those broken plates, and she went home and thought about, there was something about those plates that really moved her. And she thought, and she realized, I'm going to break the plates. So she took her 3,000-page novel and she took out little fragments from the story and arranged them on the page like a, not quite like a poem, not in single lines, but in little blocks, little groups of fragments, and was able to tell the story in a way that was artistically really interesting. There was a lot of white space, a lot of room for people to breathe. She picked incidents instead of writing all of them. She picked ones that represented the abuse, and wrote a remarkable book. Won the Lannan Foundation. She was a fellow, and it was a very big deal. So-called the Memory Room, if you want to take a look at that. So think about how much dreariness people can internalize, and how much people are going to want to sit and read this with their precious free time. The other thing is I always give the reader a chance to exhale. If you're writing difficult, tough material, a section that's really intense, make sure that you give the reader a chance to exhale, that they can have a like even in dire situation, there can be something that has some humor, even if it's very dark humor. You see, as you're lying there on the curb, something that is sort of absurdly funny. So give the reader a chance to exhale, in a tough scene. So lacing some humor in it is also a really good thing. All right, let's see what else we got. Would you say it is debatable whether or not most authors, this is Marnie, would you say it is debatable whether or not most authors live vicariously through their characters? I would say yeah. That, writing fiction is a chance to live another life. So you get to live your own life in a very sane, like for me, in a very sane, kind of small, low-key way. And then I can do all kinds of crazy, things I would never do in my real life. Say things that I would never say in my real life. Write really extreme people who I have that in me, but I choose not to act out on it. But in fiction, I want to act out on it and see where it goes, see what that really would be like. So I would say yes. Is for the same reason Stephanie says 2 lives in 1 lifetime. That's right, or more. That's why we read. How many lives does a reader get to have? Lots and lots of different lives. That's why it's such a wonderful thing to be doing. Okay, here's another one. Why do people write and this is Dylan. Why do people write and publish books under an assumed alias? Why do people use a pseudonym? Has any of you like at any point decided, figured out a good pseudonym for yourself? Why do people use a pseudonym? Well, I think I'm too egotistical. I want my name on everything. I can't even do these social media things that disappear in 24 hours. Like, no, anything I do does not disappear. That's like the most important thing. is I want it to endure, So that's completely different than my own mindset. I think people use a pseudonym for a number of reasons. One, they have the perception that perhaps they will not be taken seriously if they reveal who they are. So that's often women using men's names so that they would be taken more seriously, or using initials, but even, completely inventing a character. Writers who write a great deal often use a pseudonym for certain kinds of books they write, so that it kind of breaks up oh my God, another Joyce Carol Oates novel. I know she writes romance under a different name because she wants to differentiate those books from her literary books. So you can use them to differentiate. Often people who are some people feel more free to write under a pseudonym. They don't feel they have to think as hard about how they personally are going to be perceived once people read their work. So if they call themselves something else, they can really let their hair down. They can really say what they want to say, and they don't feel that it's going to come back on them. So there are a lot of those kind of pseudonyms. There are people who just don't think their names are that recognizable or memorable, so they think of something that is easier to remember. John le Carré, his name is Cromwell, and he just thought John le Carré sounded more like a mystery writer. So it just like titling a book, it's picking a title for a persona, writer's persona, and that's very fun to do. People working in multi-genre might have one, like J.K. Rowling has Robert Galbraith as her mystery writing, so that's under a pseudonym. So there are a number of reasons that people would do it. I've never done it because I believe in my work and I want it to be associated with me as a person. I'm fine with that. All right, and let's see if I've gotten through all of these. Yeah, that sort of takes care of all my questions that I had for the day. So let's see if there's anything else that I have missed. Any comments on what I've already laid out there? Oh, here's Jeffrey. How do you recommend me to get copies of magazines that have your early short stories? My early short stories were pre-internet, so I have a list of them on my website, of the magazines that they were in, but that will become a matter of libraries with back issues of those magazines, eBay, abebooks.com, all the used and rare book sellers post on ABE Books. But to find, a 1990 Westward, that might be a challenge. So, but thank you for asking. Anyway, I want to thank you for the questions, and please feel free to send me questions through my website, janetfitchwrites.com. Oh, MJ, hi. Would you comment on fighting that includes dialogue? Yeah. Okay. You remember, dialogue is at conflict. So you don't have to say things like ow, you don't want to say anything that anybody has ever said before. You want $1 million dialogue. So that's usually in the build-up to a fight. It's usually not in the middle when, blows are falling. Usually the violence usually comes when words fail, when people cannot any longer use their language. So it'll be in the build. And, people who are maybe taunting somebody into violence, or maybe trying to talk themselves out of it, or discussing whatever the disagreement is, that's where dialogue is going to be more likely. Once the blows are falling, it's what's the guy saying as he's kicking me as I'm curled up on the ground? Or what am I saying as I'm kicking the person sitting on the ground? But the challenge is it can't be what if 99 out of 100 people would say that, don't say it. You have to think of something else. So that's a tough one in a fight scene. It would be rhythmic. There would be a pause where people would have enough breath to say something, and have their wits about them enough to say something interesting. Maybe. But they generally don't say things and hit at the same time, because you think about your wind. Here's a question Stephanie has. Next time, I would like to know something as a published author. Do you steer clear of too much discussion about politics, etc.? Depends what the book's about. If, like the Russian Revolution book, they talked about politics all the time. And everybody had their own point of view. So, you have people around a table with, many points of view. So you really get a dimensional look at a political situation. There's a wonderful scene in, I had a student named Denise Nicholas, the actress. She's a really good writer. And she has a book called Freshwater Road about Freedom Summer, a bunch of kids going down to Mississippi to register people for the vote. And there's a scene in a bar. The girl's father has a bar in Detroit. And it's an 8-person scene. God, it's a beautiful dialogue scene. And you start to see the different points of view as everybody's discussing Freedom Summer. And they go back to Emmett Till, and they go back to a riot in Detroit at the time, that they all remember, that happened, like 15 years earlier. And it's a beautiful scene. So I don't steer clear of anything. It's like what would naturally arise. And politics is interesting. She says, I mean on topics happening here and now outside your work, your own opinions. Well, I wouldn't use it to rant about something that my characters aren't thinking. It's always through the characters. I never would lay it on, just stick it on, like, putting gum under the table or something. Yeah. Yeah, things happening here and now, that would be an essay. That's not fiction. Unless I want to write a story about somebody who's really ramped up about something that's happening here and now and their opinions, and I would create a character to carry that. But I tend not to like rants and stories. I'm not a big Roth fan for that reason. I don't like rants. But everybody to each their own. All right, well, I'm going to wrap it up here and wish you good writing, and we'll see you next week for Writing Wednesday. Thank you.